The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde is an 1891 crazy novel. I'd say it's it's the only novel that I've actually read by Wilde. The only other thing I've read is like a collection of his epigrams, but I'm definitely trying to look more into his stuff as well. He was a part of decadent literature, and you'll see why in a few moments. Why the decadent is the best term to describe this, because it's not like decadent in just that it's excess, or well, it is that, but it's not just like a hedonistic kind of um, description of life, or it's not just praising those things, or a lot of the times it's actually not, because in this book especially I see that Wilde is like saying, like, these are different ways you could be. Like, you could be a Lord Henry who's like just like all he cares about is just beauty and vanity and pursuing that, and it's like but you clearly know what that, when you take that to the logical conclusion, you get Dorian Gray. And um in it's there's a lot of different parallels to Faust too, like Goethe's Faust, especially like a deal with the devil, especially like making this bargain to with eternal, with some eternal, um a lot of times it's like in Faust it's Mephistopheles, it's like it makes a deal with Faust, who's like a chemist and a genius who wants to, make a deal, to be able to live longer, basically have it, eternity at his fingertips, and that's kind of what happens with Dorian Gray. Um, so it revolves around a the character of Dorian Gray, and Basil Halliworth. Basil Halliworth is a painter, and the novel starts out right off kind of a cold open, I think. It's very stylistic. I just love how it's written. Um, I get like a kind of a almost a dandified type of bit of like a flair from stylistic flair from Oscar Wilde. And it starts off with Basil painting, and he is studying his muse. His latest muse is Dorian Gray. He's a young man, about 20 years old, and he's just very handsome, very like just aesthetically, like just like he has like it's almost like a perfect mashup of what all the attributes of handsomeness, not just kind of like surface level looks, but he has a kind of a charm to him too. He's like, he has a way of carrying himself that's very appealing as well. And so Lord Henry, then it goes on this long, while Basil is like, infatuated with getting this painting just perfectly right. The painting that basically, becomes the centerpiece, the epicenter of this novel. And Lord Henry is just going on this long, whimsical monologue about how it's just there's the only reason to that the only thing in the world worth pursuing is beauty, just straight beauty. All else is background noise, nothing else. In so many words, he says that, and he's just saying that, and he encourages the young Dorian Gray to continue doing that. And he's like, and he's one of the kind of conscious parts in the novel, like a weird part of your conscious that's kind of, which is why I think this novel is like so pivotal, is because like Basil is like the more innocent, but he's innocent but maybe naive in a sense that um, he's and like maybe he invests too much trust in Dorian Gray, or he stakes too much faith in that kind of like, well, he'll find the right way, or he'll figure it out. But Lord Henry is just like straight up trickster archetype. It's just kind of like, why not just, a little bit of Marquis de Sade, I get the sense. He's very almost Machiavellian in a sense, just at any cost of pursuing what you want, your pleasure, whatever it is, Epicurean uh, fancies that you have, do it. So Dorian Gray is kind of at a loss, and he hears that, like, that resounds with him, but he doesn't take it instantly to heart. It kind of foments in his mind. Sorry, sure, kind of foments in his mind for a little while, and he goes on, and he actually falls in love with a girl named Sybil, who is lacking in like beauty, but she's not ugly by any means, but she's not like blessed with the same good looks that Dorian is, in the same scale maybe. And she's an actress, and she's acting in Shakespeare, and she's very talented and precocious, and she's has a lot of promise in her craft. And Dorian says that at first he rejects her, and this is his first kind of vice of the novel. Like he rejects her and he says like the only beauty that you can actually show is through your acting, and then she's like so heartstricken because she's actually in love, kind of unrequitedly in love with Dorian, and calls him like Prince Charming, like that's her like kind of pet name of him, as it were, and he's just like, but then he feels immediately bad for it, and then he basically, but that kind of doesn't fix things. She ends up committing suicide, and it's very tragic, and um, her brother James Vane, Sybil Vane, you know, and James Vane, their brother and sister, is very protective and very like broken over her suicide, and vows to find whoever this is, and like he never knows fully that it's Dorian Gray, but then he goes on, and then there's I might be mixing up probably mixing up some sequence of events, but um, Lord Henry gives him this book that is I don't think you ever get like the name of the book exactly, but there is a long section of the novel, I think, that he's like discreetly, it kind of sampling the book, I guess, like Oscar Wilde's like sampling what this book sounds like, I guess, what the exact words that Dorian's reading, and then Lord Henry, knowing who he is, basically offers this book, and he's like, oh, read this, it's about a dissolute, Don John type character. It's about like this, somebody that just like lives for, it's like a very morally corrupting type of book that he gives him, and this only furthers him. And then basically Dorian, for like there's like 12 binds, I think, on the cover of the book, or on the spine of the book, and I think for every variation of vice he basically kind of like colors them differently, I think, and basically every time he does like a vice, he does it like in varying degrees. So he might do something like rejecting Sybil, and that might just give him like a little bit of an ugly kind of visage on his portrait, because everything he does, basically the trope, I guess you could call it like a grotesque body trope. It's genius, I think. It's this, that every time that he like digresses in sin, or furthers himself, kind of like digs his own grave in that respect, the painting becomes uglier and uglier, but he remains young, forever young, kind of a like a Faustian bargain, like I said. There's Dorian Gray makes like a pact, I guess, with a I don't know, just the universe, or with just like large, maybe he just makes a deal to be able to stay and look young and healthy and handsome forever, and while his portrait just gets progressively uglier and insidious and just like absolute complete hideous, horrific, just like damning, monstrosity. And yeah, Lord Henry is kind of like continuing to come in and kind of inject little witticisms and like advice that's clearly not in his best interest, and unless his best interest is just literally just enjoying himself, which he seems to do. Like from now on, after Sybil's death, he's confronted by Sybil's brother James, and in an opium den. And right off the bat, this is like a Victorian era type of thing when you hear opium den, because that's like a lot of what was going on in the 19th century, like throughout at large. That's just the fine society of like opium dens, and he's in there enjoying himself, and he's confronted by James, who's very like incensed about his sister's death, and he demands, like, he hears somebody call him Prince Charming, and then he gets a flashback, because mind you, I should have said this, like, this is 18 years later, and Dorian Gray hasn't aged a day. He's still the 20-something guy, still like totally, retains that look, and meanwhile everybody around him, like, they're just like in the den is like, they're just like saying like, that can't be him, that's not Prince Charming, that's like, that's not Dorian Gray, that's or no, that's Dorian Gray says this of himself, because everybody else, there's quite a few people that catch on to this, and they're like, oh yeah, that is him, he just doesn't age. And eventually, somehow, James actually believes this, and he's like, in his like kind of befuddlement, he leaves him alone, but he for a little bit, but then he starts stalking him and following him his every move, and eventually he ends up getting so immersed in in stalking Gray that he ends up uh, like walking into a private hunting session between like a people hunting, and he gets shot accidentally, and uh, even though like Dorian Gray wasn't directly responsible, it still affects the picture, and he makes him like. And then at some point, the thing where it culminates, this is like the kind of the um I'm not really sure what it's kind of like the final nail in the coffin, is that Dorian Gray is visited by Basil, and Basil's like, I have something to tell you, or no wait, it's yeah, Basil the painter, he's distressed about Dorian, and he's like trying to convince him. It's like, hey, like pursue, like don't, like just forget what Lord Henry says, just like pursue, like be, you can be moral and scrupulous, like you can, like that's, you'll find that like, even though it's harder to do this and to be upright, like you should try to be that way and better yourself. And then like Dorian Gray is like, shows him the picture, and he's like, shows that how hideous it's become, and then like uh Basil, I'm wait, no, because Basil, I'm confused, because Basil had I think the picture, and like Dorian Gray didn't know about it, but because he reveals it, all of a sudden Dorian Gray like freaks out, like in this complete rage that like totally overwhelms him, and like he, to the point where he murders Basil in like a crime of passion. Like he's because I think early drafts of the book, there's censored versions and stuff that where Oscar Wilde basically said that, more or less that, and this was hinted at in the novel too, that probably because of Oscar Wilde's own homosexuality, especially in a very suppressed Catholic type of Ireland, especially at the time, the Victorian era, and him having to later on flee to France in order to, like, because France, even France at the time probably was like still had like restrictions and stuff, but like at least it was like a safe haven in the sense that he could kind of write what he wanted and express himself how he wanted. But yeah, he explored art as the medium for kind of. I like how he uses all these different characters, a cast of different characters, to discern different like worldviews. And every great novelist does this. Dostoevsky, has Dmitry Karamazov as kind of the epitome of what kind of gregarious, self-interest and so, like egocentrism can lead to, narcissism. But yeah, like similarly, Oscar Wilde uses, Dorian Gray as like become so. You can see like a sense that. Well, let me tie the novel. So basically, after he murders him, Dorian Gray, there is one thing that he's like, oh, well, I'll swear to doing good from now on, and then he basically tries to. He's like, well, There's one innkeeper's daughter that um, I will return her love, and I will show her good, and basically like he tries doing small acts of kindness to kind of get himself out of this pit, and then and then even then, but like the only thing is that his portrait gets uglier even still, like, but it just grows like a hideous smile of like kind of deceit, because it's like his own kind of like no matter what, like he's so, I guess his consciousness is so kind of in the depths of it already, in the murk, like he's so this far in deep that there's no coming out of it, so he ends up um finally like stabbing at the portrait, but each time he stabs it, like he becomes this withered man, and now the withered, disgusting, repellent figure that's in the portrait, but now the portrait is beautified, and handsome and youthful again, like he was in his youth, like how Dorian Gray was. So it's like a syzygy. It's like a contradict. It's a polar. Sorry, the light came out there. Um, it these two opposite type compulsions of human nature, like showing like the outward beauty, like the trope of outward vanity and beauty, and then the inwardness, like the inward malice, kind of at each other, so to speak. And yeah, that's, I think, as simple as it is. In some ways, it is very telling. I think it's like a very character driven, very um, yeah, it's very a very bright, um, well written novel. I will say it's very witty. It's very tongue not tongue in cheek. It's a good, it's got a good amount of, sincerity and passion and stuff, but it's very, that's why the word decadent, like the word decadent, like it doesn't mean dissolute, or like, and it doesn't necessarily indicate something negative per se. It's just like a more of a, the decadent movement was, Charles Baudelaire or Arthur Rimbaud or Rimbaud. I've heard different ways. It was that, or Paul, what was it? The guy that was but yeah, it's like you'll you'll see a lot of kind of like a terrible enfant problem children. You see a lot of that. You see, I think Oscar Wilde said that he saw himself personally as, in a letter to a friend, that he saw himself as closest to being probably Basil the painter, and then but people like saw him more as Lord Henry, like that's what the public thought about him, and then but he'd like to be Dorian Gray, and then he said like all in different ages, I think, like, so I thought that was interesting. I thought it was a it's a crazy book. Yeah, it's very heightened. There's a lot of things that are heightened in this, like, be it themes or tropes, and things that, like the things that are disgusting are very, very disgusting. The things that are romantic and sensual in this are very aesthetic in that, they're very up here, and I just love that. I don't know. Yeah, definitely, it deserves the hype. What, I'm I think it's got, like a good amount of like criticism in the early days. Yeah, I think he had, obviously, like he said earlier, that Wilde had problems, expressing himself freely in the time, especially in the late 18th or late 19th century. So it was constricting for him, but um, yeah, it I think later on it came kind of grew as a cult type of thing, and now it's like, it's freely read everywhere, I think. But aside from maybe Saudi Arabia or something. But yeah, so yeah, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Yeah, I definitely recommend. Thanks for watching.